whatever the arena is in your life, you are called to dare greatly. You are a child of the Most High God. You don't have the option of being a wallflower. What must it mean for us that Christ came not to save the righteous, but sinners? At the very least, I would hope it means that we are sinners. Now, Reed Raymond, and I warned him, so that's why he's not here today. Reed Raymond likes to tease me whenever I call him, and I ask what he's doing, and he almost always responds with, sinning. To which I usually say, still? And he's being funny, but there's something that I think is marvelous in being willing to identify as a sinner, even if it's somewhat in jest. Certainly to be trapped in sin is neither fun nor funny, but to claim to be a sinner is the first step in a long journey with Christ. For Christ came to walk with sinners and not the righteous. In his book, Life Together, Dietrich Bonhoeffer warns against the pious community where no one is allowed to be a sinner. Maybe you've belonged to a group like this before, but there are some places where members are expected to have it all together before coming through the doors on Sunday morning. How exhausting that must be. Truly, it must be exhausting to constantly need to be perfect, to never make a mistake, to never say or do the wrong thing to the wrong person. And for what? To avoid ever having to say you're sorry? Now, I'm no stranger to the desire for perfection, and I'm not really a perfectionist, I'll say, but I can sometimes get so lost in my own head about doing everything just the right way, trying to say something that's just right, that I'll sometimes do or say nothing. Ryan and I were talking about this the other day, and I said something like, I don't want to do anything or say anything until I have all my ducks in a row. And he asked why, and I said, because I could be wrong, and I don't want to say anything until I'm sure that I'm right. And up until this point, I had always thought of my willingness to be silent when I didn't know something to be a virtue. Better to be assumed ignorant than open your mouth and remove all doubt. It's the phrase I grew up with. And then Ryan says to me, just say what you believe is true, and if you're wrong, then say you're sorry. Aren't Christians supposed to be about grace? And unfortunately for all of you, Ryan did not want to come give the sermon this morning. But you know what? He's right. I mean, has it ever happened to you? Have you ever been uncertain about something, and so you kept to yourself? Maybe sometimes it is better to be assumed ignorant than to open our mouth and remove all doubt. But if you're like me, you've used that as an excuse to keep from putting yourself out there, from taking risks. And while that might help with your reputation, playing it safe to the point of not playing at all doesn't do a lick of good for the kingdom. A ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were made for. Because our sins have been bound up and conquered in Him who knew no sin, we can afford to take a risk. Because forgiveness has risen from the grave, we can afford to make a mistake. We can get it wrong sometimes. And if we're truly following Jesus, we can admit when we got it wrong and ask for forgiveness. Because the thing that we're truly trying to worship is not our own ego, but the God who raises the dead and calls into existence the things that are not. The other week, I led our vestry in a retreat, and one of the things that we talked about was this quote from Teddy Roosevelt from a speech that he gave at the Sorbonne, which I'd like to share with you. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming. But who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat." Whatever the arena is in your life, you are called to dare greatly. You are a child of the Most High God. You don't have the option of being a wallflower, especially when you encounter a time or a place that needs what you bring to the table. Will you make mistakes? Absolutely. You might even fail at the goal that you're trying to achieve, but we are not called to success. We're called to follow Jesus. And there are only two responses to that invitation: follow him or don't. So which will you choose?